The unexpected deal. The space station Orion's Edge floated in the darkness of space, a lawless place where smugglers, traders, and bounty hunters came to do business. Bright neon signs flickered, advertising weapons, rare spices, and even living beings. Here, money was everything, and deals were made in whispers and shadows. Captain Elias Carter sat in a dimly lit cantina, a glass of cheap ale in his hand. He wasn't rich, but he wasn't desperate either. He traded in rare goods, moving from one star system to another, always looking for the next big opportunity. Tonight, he was waiting for Korlak, an alien merchant who owed him a lot of credits. Korlak arrived late, looking nervous. His thick, gray-skinned fingers twitched as he sat down. His reptilian eyes darted around the room. "I don't have the credits, human," Korlak admitted, his voice low. Elias sighed. He had expected this. "Then what do you have?" Korlak leaned forward and whispered, "Something far more valuable than credits." Elias raised an eyebrow. He had heard this line before. Scammers always promised something valuable to escape their debts. Korlak signaled to a cloaked figure standing near the bar. A moment later, the figure stepped forward, and a young alien girl stood before Elias. She was small, thin, and covered in rags. Her deep violet skin shimmered faintly under the neon lights. A golden symbol was branded on her wrist. Elias frowned. "You're offering me a slave?" Korlak nodded. "She's worth more than you can imagine." Elias looked at the girl. She didn't tremble or beg. Instead, she stared at him calmly, with piercing silver eyes. She looked too proud, too confident for a slave. "What's her name?" Elias asked. "She doesn't speak much," Korlak said quickly, "but she's obedient." Elias turned to the girl. "What's your name?" For a moment, she said nothing. Then, in a soft but clear voice, she answered, "Tilara." Elias leaned back in his chair, thinking. He didn't deal in slaves. He hated the practice. But he also knew that in this part of the galaxy, if he didn't take her, someone worse would. Korlak grew impatient. "Take the deal, Carter. She's more valuable than you know." Elias exhaled slowly. He had a bad feeling about this, but he shook Korlak's hand anyway. The deal was made. Korlak grinned. "Good choice, human. You just made the deal of a lifetime. Or maybe your worst mistake. A strange presence on board." Back on his ship, the Wayfarer, Elias guided Tilara to the small guest cabin. "You're free now," he told her. "You don't have to act like a slave here." She sat down on the bed, her hands resting on her lap. "Then what am I to you?" Elias crossed his arms. "I don't know yet." Tilara tilted her head, studying him. "You don't trust me. Should I?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked around the room, her fingers trailing over the control panel near the bed. Within seconds, she accessed the ship's navigation system. Elias's eyes widened. "Hey, how do you know how to do that?" Tilara quickly pulled her hand back. I have seen such systems before." Elias narrowed his eyes. A normal slave wouldn't have this kind of knowledge. Something wasn't right. "Who were you before Korlak sold you?" he asked. Tilara hesitated. Then she said softly, "It doesn't matter now." Elias didn't push further, but his gut told him that Tilara was not what she seemed. A warning and a mystery. A few hours later, Elias sat in the cockpit, running security checks. Suddenly, a distress signal flashed on the screen. "Urgent. Missing Zirian royal family member. High reward for information." Elias frowned. The Zirians were one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. A missing royal. He looked at the image attached to the alert. His breath caught in his throat. The girl in the picture had violet skin, silver eyes, and a golden mark on her wrist. Elias slowly turned his head toward the guest cabin where Tilara was resting. Korlak's words echoed in his mind. "You just made the deal of a lifetime. Or maybe your worst mistake. More than she seems." Elias sat in his dimly lit cockpit, staring at the flashing alert on the screen. His fingers tightened around the edge of the console as he read the message again. Urgent. Missing Xyrian royal family member. High reward for information. His gaze drifted to the image attached to the message. It was unmistakable. Violet skin, silver eyes, a golden mark on her wrist. Lara. His stomach knotted. He had been in this business long enough to recognize when he had stepped into something bigger than himself. A Xyrian royal. That was bad news. The Xyrians were one of the most powerful alien empires in the galaxy. They didn't just search for missing royals. They hunted. Elias exhaled sharply and rubbed his temples. He should turn her in. The reward would set him up for life. No more dangerous runs. No more scraping for credits. He could buy a new ship, retire to some quiet moon, and never worry again. And yet, he glanced toward the guest cabin, where Lara was resting. Something about her didn't sit right. She wasn't acting like a royal, but she wasn't acting like a slave either. With a sigh, Elias switched off the alert and stood up. He needed answers. Unraveling the mystery, Lara sat on the edge of the small cot, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't even trying to rest. When Elias stepped inside, she looked up, her silver eyes calm, as if she had been expecting him. "You're a Xyrian royal," Elias said, leaning against the doorway. It wasn't a question. She didn't flinch. Instead, she exhaled softly, as if relieved the truth was finally out. "Yes." Elias crossed his arms. "So why the hell were you being sold as a slave on Orion's edge?" Lara hesitated. For the first time, he saw something flicker across her face. Pain, anger, regret. "My uncle," she said quietly. "He betrayed me." Elias frowned. He had expected a more complicated answer, but sometimes betrayal was simple. "The Xyrian Empire is vast," she continued. "It is ruled by the royal bloodline. My father, the Emperor, was a just leader, but he grew weak in his later years. My uncle, Lord Muldrak, saw his chance. He staged a coup. My father was assassinated." She took a slow breath. "I was next, but he did not kill me. Instead, he sold me." Elias's jaw tightened. Selling a royal into slavery wasn't just cruel, it was calculated. A dead hair could become a martyr. A missing hair, lost in the galaxy, meant there was no one left to challenge the throne. "How long ago?" Elias asked. Lara looked away. 2 years. Elias's stomach clenched. 2 years? She had survived 2 years in the darkest corners of the galaxy, alone, being passed from one cruel owner to another. He had seen the fate of slaves before. Most didn't last that long. "You survived," he said. She met his gaze. "I endured." Elias nodded slowly. He respected that. Survivors weren't weak. They were dangerous. A difficult choice. Elias sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "All right. So what do you want from me?" Lara tilted her head. "What do you want from me?" Elias frowned. "You bought me," she said. "Do you plan to collect the bounty?" He didn't answer, because he didn't know. Lara stood and walked toward him, stopping just a few feet away. Despite her frail appearance, there was a quiet strength in her posture. "If you plan to sell me to the highest bidder," she said softly, "then I ask that you kill me now." Elias's gut twisted. He had heard a lot of things in his time. But that was something different. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Elias exhaled and shook his head. "I don't deal in slaves." Lara studied him, as if searching for any sign of a lie. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Then I ask for your help." Elias let out a dry chuckle. "Help? You think I'm some kind of hero?" "No," she smiled faintly. "I think you are a man who makes dangerous deals." He sighed. "And this is the most dangerous one yet." Lara's silver eyes flashed. "Perhaps. But you already made it, Captain Carter." Dan, she was right. Trouble on the horizon. Before Elias could respond, the ship's emergency alarm blared. He sprinted to the cockpit and checked the scanners. His stomach dropped. A warship was approaching fast. Xerian markings. Hilara appeared behind him. Her face went pale. They found me. Elias cursed under his breath. He had planned to take time to think, but the universe wasn't giving him a choice. If the Xerians took her, she'd be executed. If he ran, he'd become an enemy of one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. He turned to her. "Buckle in, princess. We're not surrendering." Hilara's lips curled into the faintest smile. "I hoped you would say that." Elias grabbed the ship's controls and punched the engines to full power. The Wayfarer roared to life, turning sharply into a dangerous escape maneuver. The chase had begun. The chase begins. The cockpit of the Wayfarer was bathed in flashing red lights as warning sirens blared. Elias tightened his grip on the controls, his pulse hammering in his ears. The Xerian warship behind them was massive, its sleek black hull marked with golden emblems of the royal house. It wasn't a pirate ship or a bounty hunter's cruiser. No, this was military grade. And that meant one thing. Whoever was looking for Hilara wanted her dead, not rescued. Elias gritted his teeth. "They found you fast, princess." Hilara, standing just behind him, steadied herself against the seat as the ship jolted. Her silver eyes were locked on the warship. "I expected them to." "That would have been nice to know before they were breathing down my neck," Elias muttered. The comm system crackled to life, and a deep, commanding voice came through. "This is Captain Varric of the Xerian Empire. You are harboring a fugitive. Surrender her immediately, and your life will be spared." Elias didn't hesitate. He flipped the comm switch off. "Not today." Hilara smirked. "You don't trust them." He shot her a look. "Lady, I don't trust anyone flying a ship that size with guns pointed at me." She nodded approvingly. "Smart." The Xerian warship launched 2 pursuit drones, their glowing blue thrusters igniting as they sped toward them. They were small, fast, and deadly. Elias yanked the controls hard, sending the Wayfarer into a sharp dive. The ship rattled as the gravitational force pressed them into their seats. "We won't outrun them," Hilara said. Elias's jaw tightened. "We don't have to." He flipped a switch on the console, and the ship's hidden ion cannon activated. It wasn't powerful enough to take down a warship, but it could cripple a drone. He aimed. Boom! One of the drones exploded in a flash of fire. The second drone dodged and fired back, plasma bolts scorching the hull. Hilara moved fast. Before Elias could stop her, she grabbed the targeting controls, adjusted the aim, and fired. A second drone burst into flames. Elias blinked. "You've done that before." Hilara didn't look away from the screen. "Once or twice." Elias shook his head. This was no pampered princess. She had experience, instincts, and that was even more dangerous. Nowhere left to run. The warship wasn't stopping. More drones launched. "We need cover," Elias muttered. His fingers danced across the navigation panel. There, a massive asteroid field just a few light minutes away. He slammed the thrusters to full. The ship rocketed forward, the warship staying on their tail. Hilara's eyes widened. "You're not planning to. Unless you have a better idea." "Hold on," Elias growled. The ship plunged into the asteroid field. Flying through hell. Massive rocks, some the size of small moons, drifted in the void. Smaller asteroids spun unpredictably, moving at deadly speeds. Elias maneuvered with razor precision, weaving through the chaos, dodging boulders by mere meters. The warship followed but struggled. A ship that size couldn't navigate the field easily. Hilara's breath was steady, but her hands were clenched. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and they'd be crushed. Behind them, a Xerian missile streaked forward. Hilara's fingers danced over the defense system, deploying decoys. She pressed a button. 2 heat signatures shot out from the ship. The missile locked onto one and detonated. Elias gave her a look. Not bad. She raised an eyebrow. I don't intend to die today. Good. Then do me a favor and... The ship shuddered violently. The warship had fired an energy pulse. Betrayal on board. Alarms blared. Elias fought the controls, but the ship was losing power. He tried the thrusters. Nothing. The Wayfarer drifted. We're dead in the water, Elias muttered. Hilara's hands clenched into fists. They'll board us. Elias knew it too. His crew would put up a fight, but against a Xyrian war squad, they had no chance. Unless... A metallic click echoed through the cockpit. Elias turned. His first mate, Rig, stood at the doorway, blaster raised. Elias's heart sank. Rig shook his head. I'm sorry, Captain, but that bounty's too big to ignore. Hilara's expression darkened. You would sell us out. Rig exhaled. I'm just being smart. Elias's mind raced. He had trusted Rig for years, but credits had a way of changing men. Footsteps echoed outside. More of the crew. They were taking over. Elias needed a plan. Fast. The Princess strikes back. Before Rig could react, Hilara moved. She stepped forward, her foot gliding over the floor in a smooth, deliberate motion. Rig blinked. What are you? She struck. A precise hit to the wrist. His blaster clattered to the floor. Hilara pivoted, grabbed the weapon, and turned it on him in one seamless motion. Rig froze. Elias whistled. I'm starting to like you, Princess. Hilara didn't smile. Her voice was cold. If you betray us, you die. Rig swallowed. The other crew members hesitated. Their leader had just been disarmed by an unarmed woman. Elias took the chance. He lunged forward, grabbed Rig's fallen blaster, and aimed it at the rest of the crew. Anyone else feeling greedy? He asked. The crew hesitated, then slowly raised their hands. Elias nodded. Good choice. Hilara tossed him Rig's weapon. Elias caught it smoothly and smirked. I think it's time for a new crew. One last gamble. The warship's docking clamps were extending. They had less than a minute before the Xyrian forces stormed in. Elias turned to Hilara. Tell me you have a plan. Her silver eyes shone with something dangerous. I do. She moved to the controls and pressed a sequence of buttons with practiced speed. Elias's eyes flicked to the console. What the hell was she doing? Suddenly, the ship's power surged back to life. The thrusters roared. The Wayfarer lurched forward, breaking free from the warship's magnetic hold. Hilara smirked. Did you really think I would let them take me again? Elias laughed, adrenaline surging. Princess, you are full of surprises. She locked eyes with him. And we're just getting started. The Wayfarer blasted out of the asteroid field at full speed. Behind them, the Xyrian warship roared in frustration, but it was too late. Elias glanced at Hilara. She wasn't just running from her past. She was ready to fight for her future. And so was he. The betrayal. The Wayfarer shot through the asteroid field, thrusters burning hot, leaving behind the massive Xyrian warship struggling to follow. Alarms blared in the cockpit, warning of critical damage. Elias barely noticed. His mind was racing. They had escaped. For now. He exhaled sharply, fingers still tight around the controls. He risked a glance at Hilara, who stood beside him, her silver eyes fixed on the viewport, watching the distant glow of the warship fade behind the asteroids. She didn't speak. She didn't celebrate. She simply waited. Elias had seen that kind of stillness before, not in princesses, in survivors. He turned his chair toward her, arms crossed. All right, Princess. You want to tell me how you just rebooted my ship like you built it yourself? Hilara finally looked at him. Her expression was unreadable. I told you. I know ships. Elias narrowed his eyes. That wasn't just knowing ships. That was overriding my entire system, without asking. Hilara shrugged. Would you rather we were still floating in their docking hold? Elias opened his mouth, then closed it. She had a point. He sighed, rubbing his temple. Fine. But next time, a little warning would be nice. Tilara gave the smallest smile. I'll consider it. Elias grunted and turned back to the controls. I hate royalty. Unrest in the crew. The tension wasn't over. Not even close. Rig, his former first mate, was still in the cargo bay, tied to a storage crate, along with the few crew members who had sided with him. They were quiet now, but Elias knew the real trouble hadn't started yet. His crew was angry, suspicious. They weren't happy about his decision to help a runaway Xyrian princess instead of selling her for the bounty. And they weren't wrong. This was insane. They were now enemies of one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. Elias stepped into the cargo bay, his remaining loyal crew members standing stiffly, weapons in hand. Their eyes flicked to him, then to Tilara, who walked in behind him. Rig, still bound, glared. I thought you were smarter than this, Captain. Elias crossed his arms. I am. That's why you're tied up, and I'm still breathing. Rig spat on the floor. This is suicide. You know that, right? Elias didn't answer. He already knew it was. Rig smirked. Your crew doesn't trust you anymore. They're afraid. And afraid men. They get dangerous. Elias's eyes flicked to his crew. He could see the uncertainty on their faces. Tilara stepped forward before Elias could speak. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand attention. But somehow, everyone listened. You all think I am just a runaway princess, she said, voice calm but sharp as a blade. That I am simply a burden, dragging you into a war that isn't yours. She let the silence hang before speaking again. You are wrong. Elias saw the shift. Even the crew who had been glaring at her now seemed curious. I am not just a princess, Tilara continued. I am the rightful heir to the Xyrian Empire. And the man who sits on the throne, the man who sent that warship, is a usurper. Her silver eyes swept over the crew. I am not asking for loyalty. I am asking for survival. Because the truth is, you are already part of this fight. My uncle will not let you go. You know too much. The moment he realizes you helped me escape, he will hunt you down. Every last one of you. Silence. Tilara took one step closer. But there is another path. She turned to Elias. If you help me, I will not only ensure your survival, I will make you untouchable. When I reclaim my throne, my people will know you as the ones who restored balance, the ones who stood against a tyrant. She let the words sink in. Then she looked at Rig. Or you can turn me in. Take the bounty, and hope that my uncle is the kind of man who honors his word. Rig swallowed. Elias didn't need to say anything. Everyone already knew. Xyrian warlords didn't leave loose ends. One by one, the crew members who had been watching in silence lowered their weapons. Rig sighed, shaking his head. You're all idiots. Elias smirked. Maybe. But at least we're free idiots. Tilara tilted her head. For now, a dangerous plan. Later, back in the cockpit, Elias stared at the star map. His options were shrinking. He turned to Tilara. All right, princess, you've got a plan, don't you? She leaned forward, eyes locked on the glowing holographic map. Yes, but you won't like it. Elias chuckled. I already don't like most of this. Tilara tapped a glowing point on the map. A small dead world hidden in the outskirts of the galaxy. This is where we need to go, she said. Elias raised an eyebrow. You're kidding. That's a graveyard planet. No life, no trade, no resources. Tilara's lips curled slightly. Not exactly. She zoomed in, revealing old ruins buried beneath the planet's surface. My ancestors once built hidden bunkers here, long before the Xyrian Empire rose to power, she explained. They contained technology, weapons, ships, things that could turn the tide of this war. Elias exhaled. And you think it's still there? Tilara met his gaze. I know it is. Elias ran a hand over his face. Let me guess. Your uncle knows about this place, too. She nodded. Yes, and that's why we must get there first. Elias sighed, leaning back. This was getting worse by the minute. But he looked at Tilara. She wasn't the scared girl he had met on Orion's edge. She was a fighter, a strategist, a survivor. Maybe, just maybe, she was telling the truth. Elias smirked. All right, princess. Let's go find your secret army. The war is coming. As the Wayfarer set course for the Forgotten Planet, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. They had won one battle. But the war was coming. And Elias Carter, he had just chosen his side. The hidden power. A journey into the unknown. The Wayfarer drifted through the vast silence of deep space, the hum of its engines the only sound. The destination. A forgotten world. A dead planet hidden in the outer reaches of the galaxy. Elias sat in the pilot's chair, eyes fixed on the glowing holographic map. He was still wrapping his head around the insanity of this plan. Tilara stood behind him, arms crossed, watching the trajectory. She looked calm, too calm for someone heading into the unknown. Elias glanced at her. All right, princess. Time to tell me the full truth. What exactly is waiting for us on this ghost planet? Tilara didn't flinch. She leaned forward and zoomed into the planet's surface. Buried beneath its ice-covered surface were structures, ruins, deep underground. These bunkers belonged to my ancestors, she said. They built them during the First Zirian War, long before the empire you know today. Elias raised an eyebrow. And what's inside? Treasure, secret codes, a throne made of gold. Tilara's silver eyes flickered. Something far more valuable. She tapped the console. A schematic of a ship appeared. Elias's eyes widened. That's a warship. Tilara nodded. Not just any warship. A fleet. Hidden here, waiting for the rightful heir. Elias let out a slow whistle. You mean to tell me there's an entire lost fleet buried under this wasteland? Yes, Tilara confirmed. And if we can activate it, we can challenge my uncle. Elias leaned back. That's a big if. Tilara gave a small smirk. That's why I need you, Captain. Elias sighed. He really needed to stop making dangerous deals. Landing on a ghost world. The ship entered the upper atmosphere of the Forgotten Planet. Below them, a vast, icy wasteland stretched as far as the eye could see. No signs of life. No cities. Nothing. Looks inviting, Elias muttered. Tilara didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on something ahead. A massive black spire piercing through the ice. That's it, she said. Elias guided the Wayfarer down, thrusters kicking up thick clouds of snow and dust. The landing gear hissed as it touched down on the frozen ground. Silence. Elias unbuckled his harness. All right, let's see if your ancestors left the keys under the mat. The descent into the bunker. The team, Elias, Tilara, and two of the most loyal crew members, Holt and Senna, stepped out into the freezing air. The cold bit into their skin immediately. Tilara led the way toward the black spire. As they got closer, Elias realized it wasn't just a tower. It was a doorway. She pressed her palm against the surface. The golden mark on her wrist glowed. The ground rumbled. A hidden entrance slid open, revealing a dark staircase leading into the depths below. Elias exhaled. That's unsettling. Tilara didn't hesitate. Stay close. They stepped inside. The darkness swallowed them whole. The lost legacy of the Zirians. The corridor was ancient. Metal walls covered in alien symbols, flickering lights barely clinging to life. The air was thick with dust, untouched for centuries. Sana ran her fingers over a panel. This place is Old. Really old. Tilara pressed a sequence of buttons. A soft hum filled the chamber as the old systems flickered online. Then, the walls lit up. Elias's eyes widened as he saw row after row of sleek warships, buried under layers of ice. "Dan," he whispered, "it's real." Tilara stepped forward. "My ancestors prepared for a war that never came." She turned to Elias. "Until now. An ancient guardian awakens." The moment she touched the control panel, the bunker shook violently. An ancient holographic projection flared to life. A towering, armored Xerian figure, its glowing eyes locked onto Tilara. "Who dares awaken the lost fleet?" Its voice boomed. Tilara stepped forward, shoulders squared. "I am Tilara of the royal Xerian bloodline, the rightful heir. I claim my birthright." The guardian scanned her, its golden eyes narrowing. Then it spoke. "Prove it." The floor beneath them shifted, and suddenly they were falling. The trial of the true heir. Elias hit the ground hard. They had landed in a new chamber, a massive coliseum. Tilara got to her feet, looking around. "I should have expected this." Elias groaned. "Would have been nice if you mentioned the whole trial thing earlier." The holographic guardian appeared above them. "Only those worthy may command the fleet." The ground trembled. Two massive mechanical war drones emerged from the walls. Elias pulled his blaster. Of course. The drones charged. The fight for the future. Tilara moved first, faster than Elias had ever seen. She dodged the first drone's strike and flipped onto its back, driving her blade into its core. It shuddered, then collapsed. Elias, meanwhile, was too busy not dying. The second drone lunged at him, claws slicing through the air. He rolled to the side, raised his blaster, and fired. The shots bounced harmlessly off its armor. "Great," he muttered. "That's fair." Tilara landed beside him. "Aim for the eyes." Elias gritted his teeth. "You could have said that sooner." The drone lunged again. Elias fired. Direct hit. The drone collapsed. The chamber fell silent. The guardian watched for a long moment. Then, finally, it spoke. "You are worthy." The room trembled as massive doors slid open. Beyond them, the lost fleet, row upon row of warships, ready for battle. Tilara turned to Elias. "The war isn't over yet." Elias smirked. "No, but we just got ourselves a fighting chance." As the fleet roared to life, Elias knew one thing for sure. The battle for the Empire had just begun. The final battle. Awakening the war machines. The underground chamber hummed with ancient power, the lost Xerian fleet now bathed in a soft golden glow. Massive warships lined the cavernous halls, their sleek black hulls untouched by time. For centuries, they had slept beneath the ice, waiting for a rightful heir. And now, Tilara had awakened them. Elias stood at her side, staring in disbelief at the warships towering over them. He had seen a lot of crazy things in his life. But this was something else. Tilara placed her hand on the control console. Ancient Xerian script lit up beneath her touch. The holographic guardian, still floating above them, spoke. "The fleet is at your command. What are your orders, Heir of Xur?" Tilara's silver eyes glowed with determination. "We prepare for war." The room trembled as the warships powered up, engines roaring to life after centuries of silence. A deep hum filled the air as energy weapons charged, shields activated, and systems sensed to Tilara's control. Elias let out a low whistle. "Well, Princess, you sure know how to make an entrance." Tilara didn't smile. "We don't have much time. My uncle won't wait for us to make the first move." She turned to Elias. "Are you ready?" He smirked, adjusting his blaster. "I was born ready." Tilara's voice was steady. "Then let's take back my throne." The enemy approaches. As the fleet prepared for launch, the Wayfarer's comm system suddenly crackled to life. A voice, sharp, cold, and filled with authority, echoed through the chamber. You cannot hide forever, dear niece. Tilara's entire body tensed. Elias didn't need to ask. He knew exactly who that was. Lord Muldrak. The comm signal showed a massive Xyrian warfleet in orbit above the planet. Elias counted the ships. Too many. Tilara's uncle hadn't sent just a hunting squad. He had sent an armada. Muldrak's voice continued, filled with cruel amusement. Did you really think you could return? That you could challenge me? Tilara's hands clenched into fists. Elias watched her closely. He knew what this meant to her. This wasn't just a war. This was personal. Tilara lifted her chin. I am coming for you, Muldrak, and I will not stop until the Xyrian throne is mine. Muldrak chuckled. Then I look forward to your failure. The transmission cut. Silence. Elias exhaled. Well, that's not ominous at all. Tilara turned to the fleet. Prepare for battle. We take the fight to them. The battle begins. The underground hangar trembled as the fleet began to rise. Giant warships, once buried in the ice, now lifted into the sky, their engines blazing as they ascended toward the stars. Elias piloted the Wayfarer, leading the smaller ships toward open space. As they breached the atmosphere, the view was breathtaking. Dozens of newly awakened Xyrian warships now facing Muldrak's armada of destruction. It was time. Tilara's voice rang through the comms. Engage. The clash of titans. The battle erupted like a violent storm. Muldrak's fleet fired first, sending massive energy bolts and missile barrages toward Tilara's ships. But she was ready. The ancient fleet moved with precision, dodging and weaving through enemy fire, their weapons striking back with terrifying accuracy. Elias's ship twisted through the chaos, dodging missiles by mere meters. Sana, get those shields up. Elias shouted as energy blasts shook the hull. Sana, his co-pilot, cursed. I'm trying, Captain. Maybe don't fly straight into the fire. Elias grinned. Where's the fun in that? He pulled the Wayfarer into a tight roll and unleashed a barrage of ion blasts, crippling an enemy cruiser. Meanwhile, aboard the lead Xyrian warship, Tilara stood at the command center. Target their flagship, she ordered. Muldrak is on that ship. We end this now. The fleet shifted, maneuvering toward the enemy's heart. Muldrak's final gambit. Inside his warship, Lord Muldrak watched the battle unfold with cold fury. He had underestimated her. But no more. He turned to his weapons officer. Activate the Planet Crusher cannon. The officer paled. My lord, that weapon is unstable. Muldrak's eyes flashed with rage. Do it. Below, on the surface of the planet, a massive structure emerged from the ice. A hidden Xyrian weapon built in ancient times. A superweapon capable of obliterating an entire planet. Elias saw the energy spike on his scanners. Oh, hell no. Tilara's voice was calm but sharp. We have to disable that cannon before it fires. Elias nodded. I'll handle it. Tilara hesitated. It's too dangerous. Elias smirked. Princess, danger is my middle name. The suicide mission. Elias pushed the Wayfarer into a nosedive, heading straight for the planet's surface. The cannon began charging. He had minutes to stop it. The ship landed hard, skidding across the ice. The entrance to the weapon facility loomed ahead. Elias grabbed his blaster. Let's do this. He and Senna rushed inside, cutting down Xyrian soldiers in their path. The core of the weapon was massive, pulsing with unstable energy. Senna glanced at Elias. We blow this thing up. We won't make it out. Elias smirked. Then let's make it count. They planted explosives along the core. Outside, the fleet was in chaos. Tilara watched from the command deck, her heart pounding. Elias, don't you dare die on me. Elias's voice came through the comms. Detonating in 3, 2, boom. The fall of a tyrant. The cannon exploded in a fiery blast, sending shockwaves across the planet. Tilara saw Muldrak's fleet stagger. Now, she commanded. Her ships unleashed everything they had. Maldrak's flagship took direct hits to the engines. Inside, Maldrak stumbled. His empire, his power, falling apart. A massive explosion rocked his warship. The last thing he saw was his niece standing victorious on the battlefield. Then, silence. Maldrak's flagship broke apart. The war was over. Victory and a new dawn. Tilara stood on the bridge, watching as her uncle's fleet retreated. They had won. The empire was hers now. Elias's voice crackled through the comms. "Princess, did we win?" Tilara closed her eyes in relief. "Yes, Captain. We won." Elias chuckled. "Well, in that case, I want a vacation." Tilara smiled for the first time in a long time. "We'll see about that." As the Zirian fleet formed around her, her throne reclaimed, she turned to the stars. Her journey wasn't over. But for the first time in years, she was free. The rise of a new queen. The aftermath of war. The battlefield of space was eerily silent now. Smoke and debris from the destroyed Zirian warships drifted across the void. The once mighty armada of Lord Maldrak had been shattered, their forces either destroyed or fleeing into deep space. It was over. Tilara stood on the command deck of the largest surviving warship, the Celestial Crown, surrounded by officers and soldiers who had once feared her uncle's rule. Now they looked at her, waiting. Elias Carter leaned against a console nearby, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. He had been in countless battles, survived impossible odds, but this was different. This wasn't just about war. This was about a throne. Tilara had won. But ruling? That was another battle entirely. The fate of the survivors. A holographic transmission flickered to life in the center of the room. Across the Zirian Empire, broadcasts of the battle's outcome were being transmitted. The people saw it. The soldiers saw it. Their false emperor was dead. Their true ruler had returned. A Zirian officer stepped forward, kneeling before Tilara. "My queen, the remaining warlords request an audience. They wish to surrender." Tilara exhaled slowly. "Surrender?" Elias raised an eyebrow. "That easy?" The officer shook his head. "No, they will pretend to bow, but many will still plot against you." Tilara nodded, as if she expected this. She turned to Elias. "What would you do?" Elias smirked. "Well, princess, if I were in your shoes, I'd make an example out of the worst of them. Show them what happens when they cross you." Tilara considered this for a moment. Then she faced her people. "Bring them before me," she commanded. "I will decide their fate. A queen's judgment." The defeated Zirian warlords were escorted onto the bridge in chains. Once proud rulers, they now stood before Tilara like caged animals. One of them, Warlord Caver, sneered. "You think killing Maldrak means you have won? The Empire will never accept you. You are weak." Tilara's silver eyes darkened. "Weak?" She stepped forward, her voice steady but sharp. "I survived betrayal. I survived exile. I reclaimed my birthright with my own hands." She gestured to the battlefield outside the viewport. "I am not weak." Caver's expression faltered, but he tried to mask it with a smirk. "Then what now, Queen? Will you execute us?" Tilara studied him. Then she turned to her guards. "Take them to the deepest prison on Zur. Let them watch as I rebuild the empire they tried to destroy." Caver's face twisted in shock. He had expected execution, not humiliation, not to live knowing he had lost. Tilara's gaze swept across the remaining warlords. "You may kneel before me today, but know this, if you ever betray me, there will be no mercy." One by one, the warlords lowered themselves in submission. Tilara had won, not just the battle, but their fear. Elias's decision. Later, as the dust settled, Elias found himself in the royal chambers of the Celestial Crown, sitting across from Tilara. She poured herself a glass of deep blue Zirian wine, offering him one as well. "I'm not much for royal drinks," Elias said, but he took the glass anyway. Tilara smirked. You are a free man now, Captain Carter. You have more than earned your reward. Elias leaned back. Speaking of that, what exactly is my reward? Tilara's silver eyes held a hint of mischief. I could offer you a fleet of ships, enough wealth to buy your own planet, or you could stay. Elias raised an eyebrow. Stay. As my royal advisor, she said, the empire is vast, and I will need those I trust at my side. Elias chuckled. Princess, I'm not exactly royalty material. Tilara tilted her head. No, but you are something better. You are loyal, unpredictable, and unafraid of power. That makes you valuable. Elias exhaled. He had spent his entire life running. From debts, from enemies, from responsibility. And now, someone was offering him a place to belong. He took a slow sip of the wine. I'll think about it. Tilara smiled. You already have. A new era begins. As the Zirian fleet regrouped, news of Maldrak's defeat spread across the empire. Tilara stepped onto the royal balcony of the capital city, where thousands of Zirians had gathered. They had lived under tyranny for too long. Now they looked up at her, their rightful queen. Tilara lifted her chin, her voice ringing across the plaza. No more fear, no more oppression. Today, the empire of Zur is reborn, and I swear to you all, never again will we bow to tyranny. The crowd erupted in cheers. A new queen had risen. A new future had begun. And somewhere among the stars, Elias Carter wondered if maybe, just maybe, he had finally found something worth fighting for.